Just how accurate does your guitar tuner need to be? We're going to try to answer that question in this video. I did another video about tuners. It's a tutorial of sorts where we talk about the different styles of tuners, cover their features, and how to choose the one that might be right for your application. I'll link that in the description down below and put a little link up here in the corner like the real YouTubers do. And you guys can check that out. In that video, I don't talk a lot about accuracy. I just made a couple of broad generalizations. And I thought with this video, we do a deeper dive into the accuracy issue. Why do we need to do a deeper dive into accuracy for guitar tuners? I see people argue about this online all the time. And in person, I have witnessed two guys almost get into a fist fight over how accurate a tuner needs to be. We're going to do some experiments today that I hope will help you decide just how accurate your tuner needs to be. Before we get into the experiments, I want to clarify some terminology. Anytime a musical note is played, that creates a vibration in the air, and how many times that vibration occurs per second is known as hertz. The more hertz, the higher the pitch. So a low E on your guitar, that's about 82.4 hertz. So it vibrates 82.4 times per second. If you were to fret the high E string at the 5th fret, that's going to be an A, and it's going to vibrate 440 times per second, so 440 hertz. So A440 is an important note. That's what we call a reference pitch. If you know your A is 440 hertz, then you know your middle C, which is below that, is going to be 261.626 hertz. All your other notes will be extrapolated from that A440. Pretty much all your modern music, orchestras, whatever, the tuning is based off that A440. All your electronic tuners, pedals, rack mount, whatever, it doesn't matter what type of tuner, they all come from the factory calibrated to an A440. You have the ability to adjust that, but that's a whole different subject for another time. We're just going to use A440 as our standard today. Next term I want to talk about is semitone. Semitone is also known as a half step. On the guitar, a semitone is 1 fret. So if you play a G on your low E string, 3rd fret, and you go up 1 fret to a G sharp, that's a semitone, also known as a half step. If you were to go from the G, 3rd fret, to the 5th fret, that's a whole tone, also known as a full step. Our next term is cent. No, not that kind of cent. Not that kind either. A cent is 1/100th of a semitone. In other words, 1/100th of the difference between the pitch at your 1st fret and your 2nd fret. That's not a lot of difference. Another thing we should talk about before we jump into the experiments is how a tuner works. That might help pull everything together. So in real simple terms, here's how your tuner works. You're plugged into your tuner and you hit a note. Let's say that you hit the harmonic on the 7th fret of your D string. That should be an A440. Your tuner counts the vibrations per second, the hertz. It then references its onboard database and converts that information into a note name. At the same time, it's running the incoming hertz through a complex formula, which will then be converted to cents relative to the target note. This information is then displayed on your tuner. So why go through all that rigmarole of changing the hertz into cents in the first place? Well, let's take a look at our conversion chart real quick. If we look at the lowest B and C on a piano, you'll notice that the difference between those two notes, which is a semitone, is less than 2 hertz. Now let's look at the highest B and C on that same chart. You'll see that the difference between those two notes, still a semitone, but it's more than 200 hertz difference. It's a lot easier for people to wrap their head around the concept of cents. We'll let our tuners do the complex math and we'll just tune our guitars. So now I can tell you the story about the almost fist fight that happened. A few years ago, I worked in a local mom and pop guitar store, and we had a guy come in, wanted to buy a tuner pedal. So we were showing him the Boss tuner pedal, and another customer piped up and said, "Don't waste your money on that. You should buy a strobe tuner." Well, strobe tuners are kind of expensive, and our first customer said, "No, this will be plenty accurate for my needs." Well, the second guy grabs the box, looks at it, says, "This pedal's only accurate within plus or minus 1 cent. My strobe tuner is accurate to 1/1000th of a semitone." Tuner pedal guy said, "Doesn't matter, this is plenty accurate for my needs." Strobe tuner guy says, "Well, I can hear the difference between 5/1000ths of a semitone." Pedal tuner guy said, you know what, you're full of crap. You're lying. Nobody can hear that. Strobe tuner guy got upset and offered to punch pedal tuner guy in the face. We had to escort him out of the store. It was kind of an ugly scene. Pedal tuner guy bought the Boss tuner. He's been using it for years. I still see him once in a while, and he has never once complained about it not being accurate enough for his guitar. All right, enough of that nonsense. Let's jump in and do some experimentation. For our first experiment, I'm going to use this tuner, which is calibrated to A440. It's capable of producing sound. That's an A at 440 hertz. We're going to record that pitch twice on two separate tracks. And on one track, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use pitch correction software to alter that pitch by 1 cent. Why only 1 cent? Because that's the smallest increment that pitch correction software will do. That should tell you something right there. So after I've altered the pitch, we're going to compare the A440 and then the A440 minus 1 cent side by side and see if you can tell the difference between them. All right, so we've got our two tones recorded. I've gone in and adjusted the gain a little bit so that one's not louder than the other. Obviously, I did not hold the tuner the same distance from the mic on each of the recordings, but now we've adjusted that with gain. And as you can hear, there is really no difference between the two tones. Now I'm going to go in, I'm going to use some pitch shifting software to alter one of those by 1 cent. In this shot, you can see the pitch correction software, and you can see right here, it's got the name of the note, A4. Over here, it shows that it is 0 cents sharp or flat. Here's our other track. You can see that this is also an A4 and that it's 1 cent sharp, plus 1 cent. All A4 means is that it is the fourth A to occur on a standard 88 key piano. All right, so for our first experiment, we're going to take those two tracks, one of which is 1 cent higher in pitch than the other one. I've automated the mixer so it'll fade between the two tracks. I'm not going to say which one is the higher pitch and which one's the lower pitch. Keep in mind that there's only a 1 cent difference. See if you can hear the difference. Could you hear a difference? Outside of a little phase shifty thing happening when the faders were changing positions, I couldn't really tell which one was 1 cent sharp and which one was right on. Let's do another experiment. All right, for our second experiment, I'm going to take those same two pitches, those same two tones that are 1 cent apart. I'm going to pan one hard left and I'm going to pan one hard right. And now listen and tell me which one you think is the higher pitch, the left one or the right one. Could you hear a difference there? I think it was actually easier to hear them when they were both centered and we were changing faders. For our third experiment, I'm going to leave the two tracks panned hard left and right, but I'm going to bring the fader envelopes back into play and see if you can hear the difference then. For our next experiment, I'm going to take that note that is currently dead on, 0 cents flat, 0 cents sharp, and I'm going to drop it by 1 cent. Our strobe tuner guy in the near fist fight story, he would have said, well, that Boss tuner is plus or minus 1 cent. So one guy's Boss might be 1 cent sharp, the other guy's might be 1 cent flat. That's a horrible difference. Well, we're going to experiment. I'm going to have one of them 1 cent sharp, one track 1 cent flat, and I'm going to leave them panned hard left and right. You tell me, can you hear the difference? So in that one, I think there is a noticeable difference. The channel that's panned to the right is just a hair flatter than the one on the left. Now, neither one of those is right on. One's 1 cent sharp, one is 1 cent flat. But here's the million-dollar question. Does it matter? I'd say that calls for more experiments. For our next experiment, I decided to record a little cello riff using a keyboard. I decided to use the keyboard so there would be no fluctuations in pitch due to fingering or attack on the note. When you pick a note really hard on the guitar, it'll be sharp for a microsecond or so. I didn't want any variations at all, so I did a keyboard-based cello patch off of one of my synthesizers. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to take that cello riff and I'm going to duplicate it so that there's absolutely no variation between one track and the other. And then I'm going to take one of those and change its pitch by 7 cents. As you can see here, as I click on each note, it shows up here the name of the note, and it shows whether it's plus or minus any cents at all. Each one of these notes is right on. Now let's look at the other one. You can see as I click each note in this track that we are -7 or even -8 on every single note. So now we're going to have our cellos 7 cents apart. I'm going to pan one left, one right. Tell me what you think about whether they're out of pitch with each other or not. Sounds all right to me. Let's take the other track with all the notes that are dead on, and let's move them 7 cents the other way so that our cellos are 14 cents apart. And let's see how that sounds when they're played together. All right, we got one track set up where every note is +7 or maybe even 8 cents. And on the other track, it's -7 or even 8 cents. So we've got anywhere between 14 and 16 cents difference on some of these notes. I'm going to pan one hard left, pan one hard right. We're going to play them together and tell me what you think on how they sound. You see where I'm going with this? We've got a 15-cent difference on those cellos, 14 cents difference, and they sound really good together. We're going to do two more little things here. For the first one, I'm going to play you the two cellos, the two cello tracks, panned hard left and right, where they're both perfectly in tune, and then I'm going to play that same riff back to back, where they're out of tune by 14 to 16 cents, and you tell me which one actually has a better sound. So you're probably not going to be able to hear the difference quite as well on a phone or a laptop speaker as you would with headphones, but let me tell you what I'm hearing. The cellos that are in tune, the stereo separation is not nearly as pronounced as it is with the detuned cellos. I didn't change any pan settings. I didn't monkey around with any of that stuff. They're exactly the same on both the detuned and perfectly in tune tracks. The other thing that I noticed with the detuned track is that the overall timbre, or timbre as some people pronounce it, is fatter. It seems thicker and just bigger in general. So you combine that with the increased stereo separation that's more pronounced because of the difference in tunings. And to my ear, that actually sounds better. Some people might disagree. They'd be wrong. Yes. There's a reason that orchestras don't have just one violinist with a big old amplifier. They have 4 or 6 or 8 violinists, and they have 4 or 6, 8 cello players and viola players, because everybody's playing a little bit out of tune with each other just by a few cents. That's all it takes. But you get all of those slightly out of tune string instruments together, playing with minor variations in pitch and timing, and it sounds huge. So I said we were going to do two little things. Here's the second little thing. I'm sure there's somebody out there saying they're really not detuned that much. They're really not that far apart. I'm going to take the 7-cent plus track and I'm going to take the 7-cent minus track. I'm going to pan them left and right, and then I'm going to put a 1-beat loop and I'm going to switch between the two tracks, and you'll hear a pronounced difference in the pitch. All right, let's try that now, and then I'm going to offer up my conclusions on just how accurate a tuner pedal has to be. So you could hear the difference, right? There's an obvious difference in pitch. Well, what's the point? Well, the point is that there's no trickery going on here. Those two tracks are 14 cents apart, and when you compare them the way we just did, you can hear the pitch difference. But when they're played together, they sound great. That's the bigger point. That few cents doesn't matter. The even bigger point is if you've got a guitar tuner that's accurate to plus or minus 1 cent, that's going to be more than sufficient for your needs. There's a lot of them on the market that do go to 1/10 of a cent, which is 1/1000th of a semitone, but it doesn't matter. If you're within a couple of cents of dead on, you're golden. So don't sweat the accuracy thing. And if somebody tries to convince you that you absolutely need a $1,000 strobe tuner, tell them to take a hike. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully I dispelled some myths about tuner accuracy for you guys. Until next time, live well and rock hard.